Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Systeme.io podcast with me, Natasha Pinto. So today our guest is Max Mirho. He's an entrepreneur educator, virtual speaker, and the host of Entrepreneur. Welcome, Max.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Very exciting to have you on here. So I like to start our interview with a kind of backstory of how you got to where you are today. It kind of gives our audience some great context and puts you on the map for them. So where did you start and where did you think you were going to go with your career?
Yeah, totally. So I started, at least in the realm of like what I'm doing now, which is a lot of content online, a lot of speaking. I started that probably like 2.5-ish years ago, was when it really kind of started happening. When I started attempting that. And I just started off by like the idea of what I'm trying to build is that I couldn't find anything online that realistically taught how entrepreneurship actually functioned. And I was learning it myself while I was in school. I've been out of school for about 2.5 years now. But I was really learning it myself in school, and I was talking to tons and tons of different real entrepreneurs and asking like, how does business work? How does entrepreneurship work? How do you build things? And everybody told me more or less the opposite of what I saw online. I kept hearing like, well, you need to solve a problem in the world. You need to talk to customers. You need to do customer discovery. You need to try to build small things and test in the markets. And when I looked on the internet, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on all these different places, YouTube, nobody was talking about that at all. It was just kind of this weird, excited, braggy, greedy space of just people being aggressive, and it had nothing to do with actually solving a problem in the world. So I got frustrated. I thought, okay, I'm clearly not learning actual entrepreneurship online, so I should try it out myself and maybe film it so other people can learn it with me. That was the idea, and that's basically the progression that it's been on. I've done videos, live streams, all sorts of different stuff, and I ended up speaking at a bunch of universities in the process of doing that. But yeah, so that's how it started, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I can definitely agree with you. I think there is a vast section of the internet where it is that very loud, braggy, hey, I achieved this success. And if you follow me and pay me and do my courses and do whatever I tell you to, you can do it too, which is a big promise. So, yeah. I also think it's quite incredible that you've done something like this so soon outside of school. A lot of people kind of get stuck into the mode of working the 9 to 5, working a traditional desk job, and you've sort of skipped that step. And I think you've got a bit of a leg up on everyone else because we've all started with the more traditional entrepreneurship, well, the more traditional model where we try something, we're working for someone else, and then decide, actually, no, I'd rather be doing something myself.
It's a good point. I mean, like, two things there. I definitely had a lot of support, so I had a lot of help, and I was able to start a lot sooner because of that support. It made it a whole lot easier. My parents helped me pay my rent for the first while when I got out of college for the first year and a half because I needed that because I wasn't making enough money. While I was in school, I know that I didn't want to do a job, so like my senior year of college, I started doing a little bit of freelance work. And I was able to scale that up just to the point where I could survive on that with a little bit of help for the first while, and only really in the past like 6 months, to be honest, have I gotten to the point where I'm like self-sustaining completely, and I'm like making money regularly on stuff that I really really want to do. So it's been like I have had definitely I got started a bit sooner, but I definitely had a lot of help getting there. So that's important to know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's great kind of candid that being super honest about exactly what your journey is like so that people don't just assume that actually, no, this is just, if we do the same thing, it'll be that easy. So my next question for you kind of about your history is, can you give us a ballpark figure? So you say you started with a little bit of freelancing. What did you get paid for your first freelancing job? And then how are you doing now in comparison? Because I think a lot of new entrepreneurs or people who are just starting out on the same kind of journey as you get quite stuck at that first obstacle of, well, I've worked really hard and I'm putting all this effort and all this time and all of my own money in and I'm not getting anything out. So I don't know, kind of inspire them that it's not going to be that bad forever.
Yeah, totally. The freelance is like the entrepreneur's like best friend in my opinion, or at least like early consulting work or early building work. Because it's flexible, it's awesome. But like in the beginning, I was in college, I was still a student. I massively underpriced myself, and I did my first job. My first little freelance gig was working for a friend of mine doing content creation. So they wanted to post on LinkedIn because I was posting on LinkedIn a bunch, and they reached out to me and they said, "Hey, could you help me post better on LinkedIn?" And so every week I would write them drafts of LinkedIn posts, and they would post them. And it was basically just like copywriting and content creation, right? I think I did like 10-ish posts for them per week, and each one took me like, I don't know, kind of an hour. And I think I got paid like $200 every like week or 2 weeks for that, which comes out to like very little
Yeah.
is the point. It wasn't a lot. And considering it was the only thing that I was doing, like overall, I was making very, very little money. And the client was frustrating. They were always like bugging me, and I was having to redo work, so it was probably even more time. It was this whole cycle of weirdness. But it worked. Like I did get paid, and I understood exactly how much my time was worth at that point and what skill sets I could advertise. And so I actually helped a few other freelance clients for a little bit more money later on, a few months later, do LinkedIn content. And that was kind of the first little intro. And now I've just gotten to the point where I've started to pivot 2.5 years later. Like I'm completely, I don't do freelance work anymore unless it sounds like I enjoy it, because I would just much prefer other stuff. And the other stuff that I do now is paid speaking. I speak at schools like UC Berkeley, and sometimes they pay me a good chunk, which is great. And then I do TikTok creation. So my TikTok did really well. I have like 34,000 ish followers, and enough companies reach out to me that want to advertise on my channel because it's all about no-code tools and technology tools. Enough people reach out to me that I can sustain myself with that. And then I also, in the process of my show, I build tiny little business ideas, and some of them are paying me as well. And I'm trying to scale those up to something more. So it's a nice diversified little income, but I'm really only making around $2,000 a month. It's not a lot, and a lot of people would consider that very, very little. But I'm more than comfortable being completely self-sustaining on that. I live with my girlfriend. We split the rent, and I'm able to spend all of my time building up little business ideas and experimenting and trying to scale things so I can get to a higher level of revenue or success. So I'm very, very happy at the point that I'm at, but a lot of people think I'm making a lot more than I am. So
I think it's important to be kind of more honest about how much you're actually making, because yeah, people can kind of make assumptions based on like what you're doing and how much they expect that you would be making based on, I don't know, what content you're putting out, who you're working with. But I think you've got so much potential there, and because you're not doing anything with loads and loads of people, you have a lot more freedom to build those little business ideas and to keep working on the stuff that you're enjoying. So that's excellent, something to
yeah,
look forward to.
yeah.
Now I want to get stuck into some of the stuff that you speak about and that you are passionate about. So I want to talk to you about small scale entrepreneurship, and particularly about what the Silicon Valley model does to people and the mistakes that people make because they assume that's the only way to go about things.
Totally. Yeah. So I give a ton of presentations on this. It's weird in America doing it because America is so highly capitalist, and a lot of the education is circled around the exact same things. So in America, I often, when I'm presenting or otherwise, I often get called a social entrepreneur. But in like, what? My cat just destroyed something. In Europe, for instance, or Canada, I just get called an entrepreneur because sometimes I want to tackle social problems, and that is not much of what America does in terms of the entrepreneurship industry. My kind of methodology around this, and part of the reason that I get called a social entrepreneur, is like entrepreneurship to me is just solving a problem, right? In America, though, we have to solve big problems. We have to solve huge issues that have a lot of money involved, right? But my favorite thing about entrepreneurship and a lot of the stuff that I build personally is just a tiny little issue for a tiny little community that could, yes, potentially get you paid. It could become a full business, but it's not going to become like $100 million business in any world, right? Like for instance, it wasn't wasn't last night. It was the day before that. I've recently had a lot of fun finding little. I live in Chicago in Illinois in the USA. I've recently had a lot of fun finding hidden bars in Chicago, just little like speakeasy spots, and that was a big thing in America's history, and it was very very cool. So they're little hidden bars in little places you don't expect them, and they're super super nice, and I enjoy them a lot. And so I was doing a ton of research online, trying to find as many of these things that I could, and then go and visit them myself. And I've only visited like 5, but I think there's like 40 in town. Um, but I was having a lot of trouble finding them. Right, I was having like I was like scouring different lists across the internet, and I saw a lot of repeats, and like finding a few more hidden ones was really really difficult. And so I thought, okay, well, I can't be the only one who's interested in hidden bars, so maybe I can make a resource online where people can go and they can look up, and it's just a website just for these speakeasies, these hidden bars. And so I bought chicagospeakeasies.com. I'm building a little website right now. The prototype is up. I just need to write a few articles. And I'm building a tiny little app that people can use to track them down as well. But the theory, it's a tiny little niche. It's a very, very specific thing in a very, very specific location. But that has plenty of potential to be a business, right? You're a directory for a specific kind of business, and they might work with you. Like there's tons of stuff there. But I was able to whip that up, and I'm probably going to be finished with it by this weekend, and that's another project, right? No chance for it to scale and become some insanely massive thing. I mean, potentially, but the probability is very low, and it's going to be pretty small for a while, even if it does do well. But it's solving a problem, and it's going to be really, really fun for me, right? Because I love finding hidden bars, and potentially it could make me some money and scale to something bigger. But everybody else tends to think of entrepreneurship as you have to go big or go home. The larger your idea, the greater your chance of astronomical success, and it doesn't work like that realistically. Every founder that I've talked to started small. So that's what I tend to promote, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think because you've figured out the problem for yourself, it's a problem that you faced. I think you kind of guarantee yourself that there will be other people who are struggling with the same problem. And even if it is something small, you are providing that solution. And I think, yeah, you've got great potential to then work with those bars that you are finding, kind of put them on the map so they're getting something out of it. You're giving value to a community of people who really enjoy that stuff. And I know the niche bar market is always very interesting. People are coming out of COVID-19 and they're looking for something interesting to do that doesn't involve their own couch. So yeah, I think you've got something there. That's great.
Yeah, I'm having fun with it. Yeah. So
yeah, and I think the idea of starting small kind of, it gives people more of a chance with themselves. I think if you've got this like grandiose idea, it can be super intimidating to try and think of all the bits and pieces you need to work and create before you can even start it. Whereas if you start small, it is like you said, you're buying the domain, you're setting up the website and the prototype, you've got a few articles to post, and then it's there, it's done. You can then slowly work on it and put effort into it.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, people don't like it. I think it's so much easier. It's so much more accessible. It's a lot cheaper. Like the amount of money that I'm spending on this new project is like $20 a month at most. And then I bought the domain name. Like it's you can do it really cheaply, really accessibly. You don't have to spend a lot of time. But it's I don't know the school systems that I mostly talk to. Some of them love that. Some of them love that because they never hear it anywhere, and then some of them are just kind of they want to go for venture funding and they want to like build some massive Silicon Valley tech startup, and everybody in Silicon Valley always aggressively publishes the venture funded route where you have to build something that you literally can't sustain yourself, so you have to raise outside money in order to grow it at all, which is like the least like financially stable way to build a company. leads to a whole bunch of different issues. A lot of stuff in Silicon Valley is just like cool stuff. Like for instance, the dog walking app, I think it was called Wag. That was a really, really big thing in Silicon Valley for a while. It raised like $500 million or some insane amount. And everybody was talking about it. And there were a couple of other competitors, and it didn't really do much. Like it didn't really take off. And that's happened numerous times in Silicon Valley. People overfund some idea that gets a lot of hype, and it makes a lot of kids, I think that entrepreneurship is about building something cool and sexy. And they don't understand like how or what solving a problem with entrepreneurship means. And so not only are they going about building the company wrong, but they automatically think that they can't do it themselves and that they need to raise outside money, which is extremely limiting and can be financially dangerous. And so, yeah, I think the whole model there screws everybody up. But just start small. I think it has a lot of benefits.
Definitely. And then how do you come up with startup ideas? So one of your methods is obviously kind of the problem that you're facing can inspire you to solve it yourself. But what are some other ways that people can come up with the idea?
Great question. Yeah, usually I build stuff off of my personal issues. So anytime that I am frustrated with something or something doesn't seem as streamlined as it could be, I try to build something around it. One of my larger projects right now, I'm building I'm starting to learn like kind of see this like circuit boarding. So I have little like base circuit boards here, and I plug on physical programming. And it's really hard. It's shockingly hard. And there are even tools to make it really, really easy, but it's still really, really difficult for me. And I think I'm like reasonably decent at figuring things out. So if it's difficult for me, it's probably difficult for most people, or I'd expect it would be. So I'm trying to build a tool to make programming a little circuit board much easier, where you just drag and drop a few things and then it makes the program for you. So I was having an issue, and now I'm trying to solve it. I was having an issue with Chicago speakeasies. I couldn't find them myself, so now I'm trying to solve it for other people. That's usually how I come up with ideas. I'd probably say like 60-ish% of the time. And then honestly, like you get a lot better with it with practice. I think that's just kind of it's a skill like anything else. Noticing things that frustrate you and then trying to come up with an idea to solve it is definitely one. But just talking to people, like one of the problems that I'm trying to solve right now is helping women in Chicago stay safe at night when they go to bars, clubs, just out. And I'm not experiencing that. That is not my problem by any means, but I know a lot of women in town that are often very stressed when they go out at night, because a lot of scary stuff can happen. Sexual assault has been on the rise. It's been very, very scary. And so I heard that and I was like, okay, that's a really serious problem. Let's see if we can solve that. And so I'm trying to build an app. I'm trying to build a resource website, a series of other things. But it's just kind of like, I don't really do, sometimes I'll come up with just dumb stuff and I'll build it. Like I have plenty of really silly, just fun projects, but any of my serious projects are just, I have a personal problem. I notice that and I write it down. I hear somebody else has a personal problem. I hear that and I write it down. That's more or less just how I kind of do everything. It's just listening and practicing listening for problems and frustrations. And then you build something.
I think it's a great way of going about it, just because you're kind of guaranteed an audience who needs what you're building. There's nothing with building something that you absolutely love and there's nobody interested in what you've spent all this time on. So my follow-up question to that is, how do you go about monetizing your startup if it's something small? So you've found your niche, you found the people you want to help or the problem that you want to solve, you've built a website, an app, something along those lines. How do you make money off of that?
Great question. The best way to monetize something, typically, people, this is very general because there's a million different ways you can monetize an idea, and it totally depends on the idea and it totally depends on the customer. But just like some things that I have done are people always think you have to sell something directly to the consumer. You do not, right? Like in this case, my Chicago Speakeasies app and website, for instance, the people that are going to be using it there's two people that are going to be using it. There's the bars themselves, the hidden bars themselves. They might be using it for promotion, and they might see it when they're doing research online and trying to find where they fit into the online kind of community of Chicago. and then there are going to be the bar goers that are going to use it to find these bars, right? I'm not going to charge people to find bars. It's an informational resource. People don't typically charge for that, but everybody tends to think that you have to charge the consumer. In this case, for Chicago Speakeasies, like you said, you kind of mentioned, working with those bars is definitely a monetizable opportunity, right? Working with an existing organization trying to solve the same problem. So like a nonprofit or a larger organization for like sponsorship money. So there are actually a few organizations in towns like that help promote just bar activity in Chicago. And they're just like fun little organizations. And honestly, if I could get a small monthly sponsorship from them, that would be great, right? But then I also could like sell the thing to bars. But for the Stay Safe Queen app, right? Like that's the name of the helping women stay safe at night app that I'm building. I can't, and I shouldn't charge people for being safe, right? I shouldn't charge people for that app. Like that's not in the spirit of actually helping people, right? But everybody that builds an app thinks that you have to like, monetize it via ads or something else like that. I don't want to do any of that. But there are tons and tons of really, really huge, well-funded nonprofits in the US around preventing sexual assaults. And I said, absolutely work with them, right? The biggest thing for most small projects is if you're solving a niche problem, chances are there are plenty of other nonprofits or large organizations trying to do the same thing. And honestly, just working with them or having them lightly fund you or put in a little bit of cash just so you can kind of be net positive, is something that for some reason nobody really thinks of going to. But if you have that early flexibility, just a little bit of income from a sponsorship, from a partnership, from one little paid deal, don't worry about scaling yet. Getting to that point with a small project massively increases the chances that you're going to continue it, that you're going to be able to continue to build it, that you can continue to experiment with it. Just, I think everybody focuses too much on the big, giant theoretical money opportunities. And instead, I feel like you should just focus on whatever little scrappy, tiny, non-scalable thing you can do to get some money regularly now. And then that allows you the flexibility to do whatever you want with it and experiment and eventually grow it a lot easier. So I don't know. I think sponsorships, small partnerships, and deals with similar companies are the best ways to early monetize something. And a lot of people don't think about it. But again, that's very general. It totally depends on what you're doing. Those are just kind of my theories. Yeah.
I think there's some great kind of like ideas for now, and yeah, people need to focus on like that little bit of scrappy income now, because then you do have more flexibility, like you said, to experiment, to grow, to see what will work, what won't work, whether you want to try something a little bit bigger to monetize the app, the website that you've built. So yeah. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the no-code approach. So for me, it makes sense why it is so powerful. It kind of puts people who, like me, are not necessarily tech savvy into this position where you can build something that usually would take someone who is a coder, someone who studied it, who understands all of these languages which are constantly changing. So why do you think it is so powerful, and what do you think it gives people the power to do?
I think you nailed it on the head in your explanation of it. No code, for those of you who don't know, is just like, think of like Wix or Squarespace, right? Like it's a website builder. And 10, 15 years ago, you needed to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all these fancy programming languages to build anything on the internet. But now in like an hour and a half, I think, I whipped up a website for my little Chicago project pretty cheaply, right? And it looks nice, it functions well, and it's going to be easy to find it on Google. And I can do that really quickly and really cheaply without programming at all. I'm building mobile applications, I'm building web applications, I'm building databases. You can build all these sorts of like classically tech-locked products and ideas and structures now, just by Googling how to build an app no code or how to build a database no code, right? Half of my time is just spent Googling new ideas and what tools I can use to build them. And chances are 90% of the time, there's something that very easily helps me build exactly what I'm thinking of, super quickly and super cheaply. The whole no-code industry is based around helping people like you and me build ideas really, really fast. And they've made their, like, the structure of these tools is made so that you can do things very quickly. You can do things very easily and ideally very cheaply. You don't have to spend $40,000 on paying some overseas company to build an app anymore. And that used to be the case. But I think like that gives a ton of people a lot more power to build little ideas, big ideas, whatever, and experiment with them quickly. Because the biggest issue that I think was in entrepreneurship overall was people would spend a ton of money, it would go nowhere, and they would have either wasted a ton of cash or put themselves in a very financially scary situation. And I think NoCode helps people do that less, and helps you build ideas quicker. And you don't have to go to college to learn how to build something, right? So I don't know. I think it's created massive accessibility in terms of tech entrepreneurship specifically, which is not everything at all. But in terms of tech entrepreneurship, like, accessibility has dramatically gone up, makes it a whole lot more fun to build things. I have like 30 different projects at this point. Yeah, I think it gives everybody a chance to build something and try it out. I don't know, but I think you nailed it on the head with your first little explanation. Just want to elaborate.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right. These no-tech tools kind of save a ton of time. Before I worked with Systeme and hosted their podcast and worked as a writer, I was a teacher. And before that, I worked in theatre. So it was very like hands-on job, a little bit of tech with teaching that I learned on the fly, especially because of the COVID pandemic, and I taught through that. But I think learning now how to use these tools, like part of training is working through and building a sales funnel. And I am the opposite of tech savvy. Technology grates me and I get frustrated with it and irritated when things don't work. And magically, I've been able to create sales funnels, something I had no idea about beforehand. And it took me an hour to build one and make it all work and click through. And it does make these things so much more accessible. And it is more fun. It kind of feels like playing a computer game rather than battling with the language. Yeah,
it's super fun. Yeah, I like on weekends now, because it's gotten so accessible to the point where on weekends now, like if I'm bored, I just build a new website idea. Yeah, and I think entrepreneurship should be fun. I think solving problems should be just something you do to enjoy yourself. So yeah, no, awesome. I agree completely. I love it.
My next question for you is about rapid prototyping. So what is it and how do you use it? You mentioned a little bit how you've already got a prototype for a website up for the Stay Safe Queen. So what do you do it and how does it work?
Totally. Yeah. I think like NoCode, like what I kind of explained around NoCode is pretty similar. But rapid prototyping has been a buzzword-ish in the startup space for a few years now, even before kind of the boom of NoCode. Basically, rapid prototyping is just the practice of get something up there as quick as humanly possible. Like the website that I built, for instance, the Chicago website or the safety app, I built them in a few hours. But the point is, I am now ahead of everybody else that had even a remotely similar idea, because I've actually built something and I can go and test that, right? I can go and I can talk to when around Chicago and ask, would this help solve a problem? I can go and I can see if people are finding me on Google, whereas other people are just kind of thinking about the idea. That the whole impetus of rapid prototyping is just get something that barely functions out into the world. Do not worry if it's perfect. Do not worry if it even works completely right. Like it should barely do what it says it does. And if it does that, then great. Just start experimenting. See if people hate it. See if people love it. If they love certain things, build more around those certain things. If they hate certain things, then they will get rid of those certain things or fix them. It's just that's kind of the basics of it. Just build things as quick as you can so you can start learning a whole lot more, because it's really, really easy to sit at home and think you have a great idea and work through all the nuances of it and even write it down and really work it through. But you have no idea if it's going to work until you go to a customer, say, buy this or use this, and they don't or they do for a series of different reasons. And that's by far the best research you can do, is just talking to customers, trying to sell your thing or trying to get your thing into their hands. So yeah, I think like my process, honestly, like a lot of the time I skip the customer discovery phase, which is awful. Like customer discovery is going and interviewing customers before you build anything. you should absolutely do that. And then kind of understanding and learning their problems. I end up doing my customer discovery after I have the prototype. So I just try to get into their hands and have them give me feedback. And if it doesn't work, I spent a few hours on it. Oh, well, right? But if it does work, then I spend a few more hours and I experiment further. So I don't know. I think just building something tiny, getting it out there, that's the practice of rapid prototyping generally. And I think it has a whole lot of power when you're trying to solve small problems, especially. So.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of resonates with something Aurelian Amicus, the founder of Systeme, says all the time. His mantra quite often is done is better than perfect. And yeah, 100% agree, because once you've done something, then you can test it, you can refine it, you can make it better, you can decide to scrap it if it's not working. But you can't do any of that if you've just got the idea and not the physical thing there to play around with.
Exactly.
Right. So my next question for you is about TikTok. So how do you use TikTok as part of your social media strategy? Because a lot of what goes on with TikTok is more entertainment based, but you're using it as something different.
Totally. Yeah. So you're absolutely right in that kind of the basics of TikTok is very much entertainment based. It's kind of like YouTube in that sense, but YouTube has a lot of educational content on it, right? Like a lot of the best videos on YouTube, or some of the most well-performing videos, at least consistently, are tutorial videos, like how to do a thing. A lot of those do really, really great. TikTok seems definitely much more entertainment focused, I think, than YouTube, but what I do on there is education. I teach people how to do things. My best performing videos are how to build a tiny little startup idea really, really quickly, like kind of my small entrepreneurship in 15 minutes. Let's build a travel directory or a website or a listing or something like that. And so it's been it feels weird. I think everybody probably feels like they have an uphill battle on TikTok when they're first starting out. And I'm not very big by any means. I had like 34,000 followers, but it's going well. But it's definitely weird. Yeah, I'm trying to teach people how to do things. And I'm kind of fun in how I do it. Like it's a little entertaining, but it is still like mostly education focused. And so there's a lot that I have to do to kind of squeeze the content into the right format so people find it interesting, right? Yeah. Because a lot of people, like I could teach you in like 15 minutes, like right now, how to build a website. And that's super, super powerful and awesome if you want to build something. But like if I don't do it in a fun way in under 60 seconds, probably nobody's really going to care on TikTok. So it's weird. You have to compress. There has to be some almost like social sex appeal to your content. Not in the sense that it actually has to be like sexual by any means, but like it has to pull people, right? There has to be something like ooh about it, which is frustrating because I just want people to build stuff, and I think I teach best in like a 30-minute to 60-minute block of time where I get to present and answer questions, and I'll do all sorts of things. And that's why I do live streams sometimes, because that works really, really well. But people still really, really like the format on TikTok. And I think if you give away a ton of valuable information and show all the cool things that you can do with a new skill set, or just talk excitedly about a topic that you're really interested in, I've seen tons of people do super, super well. But the main thing about getting like popular on TikTok, from my experience, is just consistency. You just make a video more or less every day. I batch make my videos, so I make like 7 or 14 every weekend, so I don't have to do it every single day, and then I just post it. That saves my life, and I think everybody else should do the exact same thing. But as long as you're posting consistently and trying new ideas out, if you stick with it, you will find something that does well. Like it is just a matter of time. I've seen everybody that I know that has done well has posted like at least 20 to 25 videos. And everybody that I know that hasn't had traction on TikTok yet tried posting like 10 and none of them went anywhere, so they gave up, right? But like even now, like 1 out of every like 10, 20 videos that I post does well. And that's just kind of the nature of TikTok. It's very viral and individually bit content focused. So it's weird, but it's just consistency. It's the biggest thing that I can recommend. Yeah.
What made you choose TikTok then, if it is such a difficult place to educate on? Because I think 60 seconds is not nearly enough. I totally understand the necessity of like a 30-minute or a 50-minute lesson where you can interact and kind of engage with the people who are in your lesson. So why TikTok?
Yeah. Great question. I when TikTok first started getting really, really popular, which was like, I want to say like 2 years ago ish. I tried it. I tried posting a video there and it did pretty well, but I didn't like it. I was like, I don't know how to make, like, everybody that I knew, everybody in my audience, everybody on my live stream was always like, you got to do TikTok. You got to do TikTok. Everybody's on TikTok. You got to do TikTok. And everybody on LinkedIn, I was making a ton of LinkedIn content at the time. Everybody was like, you got to do TikTok. You have to do TikTok. And I thought it was stupid. I was like, no, this is dumb. Like, there's no education on the platform. It's all entertainment based. Where is my content going to fit at all? And nobody could really give me too straight an answer. And I didn't really see anything going on the platform or anybody like elsewhere making good short form educational content. So I thought this isn't the place for me. And then I think just as an experiment, like a year later, and this is like a year ago that I kind of like started ish. I guess it's probably only been like 9-ish months. But like 9 months ago ish, I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's try making videos in a new format. My old videos aren't doing too well on different platforms, like the platforms that I was doing well on in the past. Let's try some new stuff. Let's try posting new things on YouTube, new things on Instagram, new things on TikTok, and we'll see what works. And I didn't think it was going to work on TikTok at all. I thought TikTok was just like the first place that I was going to post stuff, and then I was going to post those short form videos to LinkedIn and Instagram, and they would do well there. And then on like my 10th-ish video, 15th-ish video, one of them did really well. And I was like, oh, shoot. And so I put a little bit more effort into it. And another one did really, really well. And that kind of kept going until the point where I think I had like 7,000 followers after a couple of really like decently big videos. They had like, I don't know, like 50,000 views, which was really, really exciting for me at the time. And then somebody reached out to me and they were like, hey, could we pay you to put something in one of your videos? And I was like, sure. And at that point, I was already monetizing after only a few months of experimenting. So I knew there was a lot of potential there. So I kept going with it. But the only reason that I kept going with it at that point was because I got traction, right? So I know my advice is like, you got to stick with it. I did not stick with it. I posted one video, it didn't do well. And I was like, this is stupid. And I quit for a year. So it just, I went back into it as an experiment because I started to come up with ideas of how I could make 60-second educational content interesting, engaging, and fun for me to make. And once I had those ideas, I was like, I might as well try it. And I did, and it worked out great. So, I by no means am like kind of taking my own advice there. So yeah, but it was just kind of on a whim.
Well, why not? Especially with these new platforms where they are kind of giving you more opportunities to go viral, where a lot of the other older ones are changing their algorithms to not benefit content creators. Okay, so now some short questions for you. My first one is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your 18-year-old self looking back?
Probably just give them a couple of I don't know, like the way that I teach kids now typically, because I talk to a lot of kids, is I usually just try to give them a bunch of tools, and I feel like that's probably what I would do to my younger self as well. Like I'm 24, I'm not that old, and I'm not like, it hasn't been that long since I've been 18. But when I was 18, I had no concept of how to build stuff. Right. And I very much thought that I had to be a programmer, I had to learn programming, or I had to find a programmer to build anything. But even like 6 years ago, there were tools to let you do that. And I think learning those tools early would have gotten me started building things much earlier. And I would eventually, through the process of building things, learned how I need to solve problems and fix issues for people if I want to have anything become successful. So yeah, I think it would have been, number one would have been post content on the internet more. Yeah. Because that has been like a very successful theme throughout my entire kind of career so far. And then two, start building things. I would give them a couple of tools to go and start building things. So yeah, I think that's the best that I can come up with. But it's a great question.
Yeah, some good practical advice. I like that you would be quite conscious of the fact that even back then there were these tools that you could use to build things, and kind of pointing more kids in the direction of those is probably life changing for a lot of them.
Yeah.
My next question is, what was your favorite project or prototype that you worked on? What was the most fun to build?
Great question. The hmm. I usually answer that question with the thing that I'm currently building, just because I'm most excited about that current thing. But the thing that I had the most fun building probably was it was a while back, and I finished it a little while ago. It's probably my most intense tech project so far. Um, it is a simulation for professors, and I've rebuilt it multiple times. But it's a simulation for professors to use in their marketing classes to teach their students how to run PPC ads. So like Facebook ads or Reddit ads or YouTube or Google ads. That process is very similar across different platforms. It's basically you make a campaign with a few basic settings. You make an ad set that targets a specific audience, and then you make an ad that looks a certain way, right? And that process is surprisingly easy to learn. But a lot of professors, and I took marketing classes in college, and I went to a pretty good business school. The stuff that they teach you in marketing classes really like barely touches PPC advertising, even though it's such a like useful skill in terms of digital marketing. So I made a little simulation that basically walks you through the process in a much more succinct way of running your own ads, of looking at the data and saying, okay, that one didn't work, that one worked, and then A/B testing and that kind of early process. But I made a little simulation online to do that, to make it easier to teach it. I'm currently selling it to universities, but it took me much longer than any of my current projects. It probably took me I want to say 10 hours on the first try. And then I rebuilt it on a different program a second time. And that probably took me 20 hours, maybe 25 hours, but it wasn't like a giant project by any means. It just took me a few weeks and took me a few sessions to get done. But that's probably the most fun that I've had building something, just because I was really getting into learning a new tool. I was experimenting. I was looking at a ton of stuff online, and I would run into an issue, and then I would fix that issue, and I would be very excited. And it was this whole kind of back and forth thing, and I really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, and I think that has some of the most commercial applicability out of a lot of my other projects. So I'm very excited to start selling it more. So yeah, that's probably my answer.
That's a great one, because it's also maybe solving a problem that you would have experienced when you were in those marketing classes, and something that continues to be a problem. So yeah, it's a great project.
That's what I came up with. Yeah.
All right. And then my final question for you is, where can our listeners find you? So if you let me know your website, any of your tags, I will pop them in the description.
Yeah, totally. So basically on TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, most platforms, I'm at Entrepreneur with an underscore before the nerd. So at Entrepreneur_nerd. And then my website is entrepreneur.blog or .com. Both reroute to the same place. But if you just Google Entrepreneur, you'll find me across a whole bunch of different platforms, and you can, it's pretty easy to find me from there.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Max, for joining me and for giving me your time. And thank you to our listeners today. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us on a podcasting app, subscribe to the Systeme podcast so that you never miss an episode. Systeme.io is a digital marketing software platform packed with all the tools you need to grow your online business.